13 years ago, on a short bus in a small town in Washington, two idiots met. A bunch of stupid stuff happened. We want you to listen to those stupid stories.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Living with Humor. I'm your host, Brock Terrano.
I am Brent Tomczak. I have been a co-host of Geek Variants and friends with Brock for now 13 long years. Gray hair is starting to come in, man. Thank you for those.
Yeah, good job. You finally introduced yourself correctly, Brent. And today we got a special guest. We got my good friend Joseph Rogers. He is the producer of Comedy in Kitsap and also has his own podcast called the Potcast. So take it away, Joe.
Hey, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to finally have you on. And then, but yes, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, how'd you get started in comedy, and what was your first time on stage like?
Long story short, I always wanted to do comedy ever since I watched Richard Pryor as a kid, Robin Williams, George Carlin, and then later in my 20s I got into Bill Hicks big time. Mm-hmm. And I just always wanted to do comedy, but I never thought I'd have the balls to get up there and do it.
Yeah.
And I went down to Santa Monica, California with a friend, my best friend, who had his brother doing a comedy show out of a garage, and he was doing it for like 10 years, and he called it Comedy Car Hole. And so I went down there with my friend to go be part of that, and I got to watch him set up and talk to him about the show and everything like that, and I was just totally intrigued. And when I came back to Kitsap, I was like, you know what, I have free reign basically in this area to do whatever I want comedy wise, which I don't think most cities have as much free range as I had. I think at the time there was only one other comedy producer. He was only doing benefit shows at the Cloverleaf and stuff like that, and other bigger venues. But basically all the bars and stuff I had access to promote and to offer comedy. So what I did was I came back up and I contacted Susan Jones, who is my comedy mentor, and I've known her since I was 15 years old. She actually took me in when I was homeless trying to finish high school. When I was 16, and I stayed with her for a couple years until I finished high school, and then I moved out to Bremerton. And so when I moved out to Bremerton when I was 19, that's when I met these friends, and then I went down to LA when I was in my early 30s, and I went to this comedy show. So fast forward 12 years later, I wanted to do comedy, so I called Susan Jones, and I was like, hey Susan, I want to do comedy, I want to do stand-up, I want to produce shows as well. And she goes, awesome, here's a list of 10 comics that I think will do good in Bremerton. Just book like 3 of them at a time. You can have 3 or 4 shows out of them. And so that's what I did. I reached out to those comedians, had them out to Bremerton for my first 3 shows, and all 3 shows went really well. Nice. So that made me feel really good. And I did those shows at Chips in East Bremerton. So Chips Casino in East Bremerton used to be a casino and a bar and a restaurant. And the casino decided to leave. So they picked up all the tables, all the poker tables, and moved to Mount Lake Terrace on the other side of the water. But they still had a lease for that spot, so they kept the bar open. And with all the tables clear, it was just an open bar with a huge space and a stage.
Nice.
So I was like, okay, well, let's do shows here. And I was dealing cards at the time when they decided to move the casino. So I already had a connection there on how to do these shows. So everything just kind of like worked out for itself really well in my favor. And after those 3 shows, that's when I was like, okay, we're doing this, motherfuckers.
Yeah.
We're starting comedy in this area. We're gonna go hard. My very first show was in my backyard right before I did these 3 shows. Was in my backyard on June 24th, 2012. And it was Susan Jones and Justin Hayes.
Okay.
And that's when I did comedy for the first time, was hosting my backyard comedy show, and I have a recording of it, and it'll never see the light of day. It was pretty bad. And then, but I do remember the first few times I got on stage, I had to get shit taken. I basically had to get as drunk as possible without passing out, so that way I can get up there and do it. But once I did that and failed a few times, I felt better and didn't need to get drunk. So then I was able to do it more often with less pressure.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know your first show was the backyard show. I remember you talking to me about that show. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. And the fact that you got both Susan and Justin Hayes on that had to have been a good show.
And that's where I say it was a good show. And I had I think a lot of friends showed up, like at least 25 friends. And my backyard wasn't
great
we had
now.
We had a keg, so that helped.
Nice, yeah.
But that's where a lot of the chips and shit fell into place, was knowing Susan and having Susan be like, hey, me and Justin Hayes will come out for your first show. So most people that just decide to do comedy don't have those kind of connections, you know. So there was a lot of luck involved with all of that, starting out really strong. Now, I did make some mistakes as a producer in the first couple of years, but I think that's normal because my approach to it was, I'm just going to go head first. I'm going to make these mistakes, but I'm also going to learn from these mistakes, you know?
Yeah.
So when people told me I was doing things not according to what we should be doing, then I would take it in and I would adjust, you know? So I wouldn't be like most people where I'm like, this is my show, shut the fuck up, I'll do whatever I want, you know?
Yeah.
I actually cared about comedy. I wanted to do it right. So.
Yeah. No, I think when I first met you, I haven't seen you perform yet, but you were producing at Cookies. And that's when I kind of introduced myself, because that was when I was starting to get into producing, but I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. And then you agreed to sit me down and kind of give me some pointers, which I'm still thankful for. But yeah, I would love to have Susan and Justin on here down the road once we're a little more established, so that way it's worth their time.
Yeah, well, Susan lives in Vegas now, but Justin is actually going to come out to my 10-year anniversary show on June 24th.
Oh, so, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to have a bunch of local comics. It's going to be a locals show with about 10 or 12 local comics, and then Justin's going to close it out, just like he did the very first show 10 years ago. So
that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. That's a good way to celebrate your tenure.
And you're on that show, by the way, so you better not fucking book something else on June.
I won't. I already wrote it in my calendar. So.
Okay, cool.
And then so God, I'm almost 8 years in. So do you feel like your 10 years went by quick?
Oh, fuck yeah, bro.
Yeah.
So quick, like. And even though I didn't do anything for quarantine, you know what I did for quarantine? I sacrificed myself for my country, and I played video games for a week straight. So
fighting a good fight.
Yeah, fighting a good fight, man. I did my part. And I still count that as a year under my belt.
Okay.
Comedy. You know what I mean? Because even though I wasn't hitting the stage, I was still actively thinking of ideas, new jokes, writing stuff, you know. So even though I wasn't on the stage, I was still actively keeping my mind in comedy, you know.
Yeah.
I was going to say, the memes during quarantine alone were just absolutely some of the best humor I've seen from anywhere. People got very creative during that time of just being trapped in your home. It's like, most people, that's like a nightmare. For me, it's like, this is Christmas. I can go out. I want to see people. This is great.
And I'm super lucky in that respect too, because I'm in a position with my family, with my, I quit drinking before quarantine. So I was very lucky in the timing of it all, because I wasn't in a fresh relationship. My kids are grown, you know, my youngest is 13. So it's like when they told me to stay home and get stimulus checks, I was like, fuck yeah, I can do that for a year. Like this is awesome. I'm in a happy relationship, so it didn't really strain me. I was also an essential employee, I guess, selling weed at a shop through quarantine, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Essential is essential.
Yeah, essential as fuck, bro.
So I was gonna say, I was considered essential after a while, but it's literally, I live in the state of California, and then the governor's like, yeah, we're shutting everything the fuck down.
Yeah.
Literally, all of the big bosses came. I worked at a mine. They're like, yep, we're done. We don't know when we're gonna be back. It could be a week. It could be a month. It could be a year. We don't know. And I was like, I've never been able to grow a beard before. So I was like, cool, I'm gonna use time off, and I got so much money, so I was like, I'm gonna grow a beard. They literally called me the next morning, hey, can you come in first thing Monday? Fuck! And of course, like, God of War was just coming out at that time, so I was like, why is this happening? Why, God? Why?
That was a good game.
That was a fantastic game. I'm so excited for the second one. But anyway, back on the actual topic.
Yes.
They considered me essential, so it was like, I got to watch everybody else live their best life at home, and I was still essential part of the public, so I'm like, why don't I get to enjoy this? I'm working overtime. Who's doing this right now?
Yeah, the thing I think is funny is my friends and family, when they found out that selling weed was essential, they called me up or texted me, and they're like, please, Joe, explain to me how selling weed is essential. And I was like, well, the state of Washington makes $1 billion a year in taxes off weed sales, so it's essential.
Yeah.
Despite what the weed does for each individual person on a medicinal level, let's just cancel that out, because the state doesn't give a fuck about that. They just care about getting their money. They just care about getting their money, and that's why it was deemed essential, in my opinion.
Oh, totally. Not only that, but people would have rioted if they shut down liquor stores and weed shops.
For sure. I was like, you cannot shut those two things down during quarantine, bro.
Yeah.
People will riot. They will rise.
Essential.
They will rise up.
January 6th would have happened in every state.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I mean, Washington is basically California light. So it's like, if we took away those two things, I would be like, excuse me, you're not going to trap me in my house, but these two items to keep me from rioting. And they're like,
yeah, exactly.
You know, you can have those. And it's like, the states are making ridiculous amounts of money on that. It was like, I have never been high in my life. I've never partook. But all my friends that have, I totally get it. They are more relaxed, they're happier, and they're more enjoyable when they usually have something in their system of either alcohol or pot. They're just better people, they're more relaxed, less strain on them, and they're more enjoyable to be around.
Dude, if you're not drinking and you're not smoking, you better be fucking. That's all I gotta say. You
yeah,
gotta have
exactly.
something in your life that makes you feel good. But I will say, what's funny is if they would have shut down weed and liquor during quarantine, you know who would have come up? Mushroom and LSD dealers.
Oh, totally.
They would have come up so hard. I think they already did through quarantine.
A little bit, yeah. Well,
that's
when Denver, or state of Colorado, they legalized the medicinal aspect of it.
Yeah.
And didn't Oregon follow suit like right afterwards?
I think so. I can't remember if it was decriminalized or legalized.
It was decriminalized.
Decriminalized,
Yeah.
But for medicinal purposes, I can't wait till states start making mushrooms legal, where you can actually go to a medicinal mushroom shop and get the different strains of fungus. That's what
I know.
People fucking do.
Well, what's gonna be funny is just like weed. Like before weed was legal, you'd get like you would never knew what you were getting. It was half the time it's just dirt weed, and then they became legalized, and it became a lot more potent. So I have a feeling that's going to happen with mushrooms too.
Well, I don't know if you can control potency with mushrooms like you can with cannabis.
Oh, okay.
I think with mushrooms, it's more strain oriented on the effects. So there are certain strains that are stronger than other strains. So yeah, but like with cannabis, you can actually manipulate the plant to produce more THC. Where I don't know that the only thing you can do with mushrooms is create such a great environment that you get big mushrooms.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. So you know more than I do.
I mean, you heard the show called The Podcast. Like, I mean, hopefully you know what he's talking about. Like, is this like some of the stuff that you talk about on your show, or what kind of is the angle with podcast?
Well, I don't usually talk about mushrooms on the podcast show, but I do talk about weed strains, how they affect you. We cover the smell of the weed. We cover the taste of it. How, indica sativa hybrid, like if it's actually doing what we expect it to do from that type of strain or whatever. And basically just grade high quality weed. We tend to stay away from cheap weed because it's hard to say really good things about cheap weed, and we want to stay positive. So we basically just kind of have a threshold of quality that we like to meet, and then talk about that. So for example, one of our favorite things to do is if there's a strain that 3 or 4 farms do the same strain, then we'll get that strain from each farm, and then we'll do a comparison on each one, so we can see if there's differences between how they grow, the look of it, because if it's the same strain genetically, it should be pretty similar across the board. But there are variances because they're different growers. Some have good technology, some of them have less technology. So basically we just talk about cannabis and what it does and what we enjoy out of it, and basically just try to get the word out about really good stuff.
Yeah. No, it's definitely an interesting podcast. Everybody who's listening, definitely check them out. And you can give them the link or whatever after if you want to do it now.
It's tricky because it's called the Potcast Show. So people will try to put in the Potcast Show, and then Google and YouTube will autocorrect it to the Podcast Show.
Yeah.
So that's a really bummer. But if you can find the Potcast Show, you'll see this face. It's me. But I just interviewed Duncan Trussell a few weeks ago on the podcast show, which was super cool because he's technically the most famous person I think I've ever met now. And he was super cool about the interview. It was kind of an impromptu sit down, and I was stoked about that. So we just want to be able to do virtual stuff down the road. We've done virtual messenger calls on the podcast show and done virtual smoke sessions and stuff like that. We're just working. We're in between studios right now. I have a studio out of my carport that I shoot, and I'm working on trying to find one that's good for a year round inside that somewhere.
Yeah. No, that'll be good. Never mind. He wouldn't work because he doesn't work there anymore. I was thinking about, do you remember James, Billy's friend?
Where do you work?
Black guy. He worked at that where they were filming the Havering Halfwits.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say him, but I don't think he works there anymore.
No,
because they have a podcast studio in that studio. But yeah, and definitely I want to have Billy and Paul here at some point. But yeah, so aside from your first time on stage, what was the biggest bomb you've had in comedy, do you think?
Ooh, man, there's so many to think of.
I know.
I mean, I've come to the conclusion that in the last 10 years, I've at least gone up on stage over 500 times at least. So, but there is one memorable time in my first 2 or 3 years into comedy. There was a show at the Red Lion in Port Angeles. It was a corporate gig for a wood company. Timber yard, is that what you call it? Lumber yard.
Oh, lumber yard, yeah.
And there was 300 people there. So this was like the biggest show I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
But the whole operation of how it went down, there was this gal out of Port Orchard who ended up landing this gig through a friend of mine. So somebody reached out to my friend and was like, hey, we're trying to get comedians for this comedy show at the Red Lion for this corporate gig. Here's $300. I think it was $300. It could have been $500. And they were like, we have this much money to put down on comedians. Do you know anybody that could do that? So my friend, instead of reaching out to me to provide the comedian, he reached out to his aunt or some shit like that, who was dabbling with open mic and had never produced a show before. So she's like, yeah, I can get comedians together. So she asked me and one other comic who was an open micer who had only been up on stage 2 or 3 times.
Oh shit.
And she put herself as the closer. She put herself as the headliner of the show.
Okay.
And so she told me originally weeks prior to the show that it was going to be a clean show.
Yeah.
And then the day of the show, she told me it doesn't have to be clean. She goes, you could. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to know. Like, I don't like this not knowing things.
Well, especially with corporate gigs, because they usually have to be clean.
Exactly, because that was what I was preparing for. And then she's like, oh, don't worry about it. You can do whatever you want. So I was like, okay, fine. So the first guy goes up there, and he shits the bed so hard. Because he's not a real comedian. He's just a friend of her. And, and so I go up next, and I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right because I'm doing all my best shit, which is a little dirty. Yeah. People are loving it. And I get to the point like halfway through my set, so probably like 10 minutes in, and this old lady yells out, talk about something else. And I was like, okay, what do you want me to talk about? She's like, talk about politics. I was like, oh, you want me to talk about politics? Okay, fuck politics, is what I said. Fuck politics, fuck our government, fuck all the politicians, fuck them all. Yep. And they did not like me saying that. So, which is funny because out of the 300 people that were there, 250 of them were yard workers. Like, they were fucking loving my shit. Yeah. And then 50 of those people were the CEO and his family and friends and his parents and shit like that. So the CEO comes up to the stage and pulls me off the stage in the middle of my set. And he looked like Stone Cold Steve Austin, right? So I was like, oh no, Stone Cold Steve Austin's pulling me off stage right now. What do I do? And I'm making a joke out of it, right? And everybody's laughing, cracking up. So I guess it wasn't really bombing per se, but
it's just a weird show.
I've never been pulled off stage before, so that's what comes to mind. So he literally pulled me off stage, and then lo and behold, guess who's after me?
The closer.
The closer who busted herself as the closer, and had probably only done stand up a few times. And she just shit on bed so freaking hard, and it was so bad. The whole show was a disaster. And after the show, I was in the bathroom, and there was a bunch of people that came in. They're like, "Hey man, sorry, we love your shit, but our boss is a total dick. Like, that was messed up, man." He's like, "We work at a fucking lumber yard. What do they expect, you know?" Yeah. You know, you should be telling jokes for all of us, and they should be dealing with it, you know, because it was a small group that didn't like me. But you know, other than that, I would say fucking just the random open mics. You know, and trying new jokes and bombing. I think there was one show where I was telling jokes and I was still new in comedy, and as I'm telling my joke, I'm realizing that everybody is looking at me. Everybody is engaged. There's like 50 people there. They're all engaged. They're all waiting. They're all anticipating the punchline of my joke, and it's not a great joke. You know, so in my head, I'm like, oh my God. So as I'm telling the joke in my head, I'm also thinking in the back of my mind, I better fucking land this joke, because they're all staring at me, waiting for me to make them laugh. Yeah. And I think I made 2 out of 50 laugh. So that was pretty bad.
Yeah, that's rough. I think the worst bomb, not including open mics, well, if I include open mics, it'd be that one night at Remedy when I tried that we should go back to bullying children bit.
Oh yeah.
that I haven't done since. I need to brush that one off because well, it was a weird crowd. But anyway, the one that sticks out the most for me, as far as like worst I bombed or felt like it was the worst I bombed, was the first Dog Day showcase that you booked me on years ago. I don't know if you remember that. It was me, Josh Firestein, and Casey McLean. And I was hosting. I think it was like my first real hosting gig.
Yeah.
And I was just doing all the material that I thought was great, and the crowd just wasn't having it. And it was so bad to where after my set, and at that point in time, if I bombed that hard, I would just leave. But I was hosting, so I didn't. And it was so bad that Casey McLean gets up there, and he's like, all right, well, give it up for Brock, everybody. And then just like crickets. He's like, well, or don't. And it was just like that the entire rest of the show. That was pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only other time I bombed at shows that weren't mic'd were when I got too drunk.
Yeah.
And just slurring, not doing good. But I learned my lesson not to do that shit. So.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The weirdest show, one of the memorable shows, is that open mic at Cookies I did, where that guy kept heckling me, and then afterwards I tried to crack a joke. I was like, "Hey, you heckled me, you should buy me a beer," and he got all pissed off at me, and we started getting each other's faces, and you had to come over, like, Brock.
I remember that.
Go inside. I'm like,
yeah. I think I saved your life that day. I'm not sure.
Probably.
Brock, how large was this man that you were trying to start shit with?
I was at his belly button.
Pretty usual.
You can tell he was getting ready to punch him right in the dick, though. You can tell.
I was about to swing on him.
That is the best thing about your height, is literally straight shot,
yes,
game over. I don't care how tough you are, that happens to you, done. Game, set, match, you won, bro.
Yeah. But no, that was definitely a interesting night.
I feel like every night involving comedy that has come out on this show is just like, every time you just say interesting night, I'm like, how do you guys define interesting as the rest of everybody else in society?
I think we have a higher threshold.
We do. So interesting usually means something went down. Something went down. But I will say, on the topic of bombing, I think that's the biggest reason why people who want to do comedy never do comedy, because they're just too afraid of not doing well. And the reality of the situation is most people who start doing comedy don't do well. And that's part of the process, is failing enough times that you actually want to get better, and that you feel like you need to get better and you need to work on it and practice and keep failing until you can get past that. And then once you start doing good and having good sets, the rush you get from a good set in front of a good crowd is better than any drug I've ever fucking done.
Yeah,
and
100%.
It is the most addictive thing, probably the healthiest addiction to have, is the rush you get from a really good show. Because there are times where my adrenaline is just flowing off the charts after a show, and I can't sleep for fucking hours after midnight, because I'm just so zooped from the show. And a lot of it has to do with all the nervous energy that gets built up before a big show. You're just you're a wreck. And not everybody in comedy is like that,
right?
But I think if you got a level head about yourself and you don't think that you're God's gift to comedy, you're going to have nervous energy. And when you do well, and Susan taught me to use that nervous energy to your advantage on stage. And when you do that successfully, all that nervous energy and then the release of coming down off that combined is what gives you that rush. And there's really no better feeling in the world. The only other time I get that same kind of rush is when I'm playing Call of Duty, Hardcore Search and Destroy, and I'm just murdering people left and right, and it's a good feeling. So
no, absolutely, and I totally understand what you're saying, Because like when it's a showcase or show like that and you kill it, amazing feeling. Another big one for me personally is if I do a new set, because like I know everybody has this, but like for me, like when I do new material, I am so nervous because it's pretty vulnerable doing new material. Because like you're sharing your thoughts and you're hoping to get the reaction you want. And so when you do well with new material at an open mic, that to me is like the most dopamine I get, I think.
Yeah, especially when you do new jokes at an open mic and you know that most people there is probably the first time seeing you.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
You're like, well, you want to leave a good impression because it's the first time seeing you, but it is new jokes, so chances are it's not going to go well. Yeah,
it's definitely the most nerve-wracking for me, but also the most rewarding.
I think I have to try a new joke on stage at least a dozen times before I really start to get a feel for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either just the timing of it or where you place it within your set.
Everything. So the timing, the delivery, the wording. A lot of the times the wording needs to be rearranged. And you can only really do that by doing it on stage. So you can think of a joke and then it sounds good on paper, but then once you try it, then you're like, okay, I have to rearrange it. I have to put this word here, make this punchline here, just revise and edit like you would any paper or writing, and then just doing it on stage is the best way to work out a joke, basically.
Yeah, and what I like to equate it to is like musicians have like band practice or studio time, but comedy, all you have is open mics. You need that live feedback to really know how that joke's going.
And in the football world, in NFL, the term they use for getting experience is getting reps, right? So each play that you're a part of on the field is a rep, and you need as many reps as you can get. In comedy, it's the same thing. You need to get on that stage as much as possible. You need to hit that rep and get that rep as much as possible. And I was talking to Drew the other day, and I said, it's really easy to chalk up these good shows and these open mics as XP points, So you basically are just gaining XP points. You do an open mic, you get 2 XP points. You do a showcase, you get 5 XP points. You do a comedy club where there's 200 plus people there, you get like 5 or 10 XP points. You follow that up after you go to the club, you go do a dive bar in fucking Bremerton, that's 5 XP points, So you're just building up all these XP points until you're 10 years later and you're like, I'm kind of funny.
Don't work on that charisma stat.
Like maybe another 10 years from now, I'll be funny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's very well put.
And then I feel like comedians are like their own worst critic in literally every regard. Nothing anyone from my side can say to you guys is nothing you haven't thought of yourself or already said, but like 10 times worse, no matter like how blunt the audience can be. You guys have been destroying yourselves for like no reason. Like most of the comedians I met, absolutely hilarious people. But man, are they just hard on themselves. I don't know what it is about the
Well, I will say there's 2 types of comedians I've noticed. There's the kind of comedian who is hard on themselves. They don't have an overinflated sense of where they are and how funny they are.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are perfectionists, right? So they'll watch a recording of themselves on stage and they'll be like, damn, that was a good set, but it could be better. And here's where it could be better. So we study our own sets.
Yeah.
So it's easy to be hard on ourselves, but to get better, right? So it's part of the process. The other kind of comedian that exists are the ones that start and have a set and don't think that they need to change it. They don't think they need to revise it. They think they already got it all figured out. They think that they're already as funny as they can be. And they have an overinflated sense of self and where they are in comedy. And unfortunately, those people never get better. They never get better because they already think that their set is just fine the way it is, And sometimes that happens. I've met good comedians who are very
one-trick pony.
Well, one-trick pony, but also just like super confident in themselves,
Yeah.
And it works for some comics, but for the most part, if you if you doubt yourself and you have thought about quitting comedy at least once a year, you're doing it right. You're doing it right.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because if you think about quitting comedy, if you get discouraged in comedy, that means that you don't have an overinflated sense of self and where you are in comedy. It means that you understand that there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
And I would rather be that comic than the comic that feels like they already have it figured out and they don't need to change anything. And you'll notice that comic from time to time because you'll go up to him and be like, hey, I thought of this tagline I think would be great for your joke. Would you like to know? No, I don't need any taglines.
Yeah.
Like, no, do I look like I need help? Do I look like I'm looking for your help? No, I don't need your help. You know, and you get that from time to time in comedy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do think that there are more comics that are humble and know where they're at. I don't think it's like 50-50 with comics when you
No, not at all.
But there are a few comics that just come out of the gates and those are the ones I think that are drawn to the comedy because it's about them. Because it feeds their ego and it makes them feel good.
Yeah.
I sent a video to a comedian who didn't do, this was a few years ago. He wasn't doing very well. And so I sent him a video. I said, here's a video of your set. I want you to study it. I want you to analyze it. Yeah. And I want you to learn from it and get better from it. Instead, he watched the video with the type of mindset of, look at me go. Look at me go. Look at, I'm doing it. I'm going, you know? And I'm like, man, you can't look at it that way. Like, you have to shit on yourself. You literally have to shit on yourself to get better. You can't. Yeah. You can't be like, look at me go. Look at me, mom.
Yeah. And I think with that humility too, it shows that you actually respect the craft too.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
There's reasons people like me don't go up there. I don't have the craft, the tenacity, or just the overall delivery to do what you guys do. There is so much time, effort, energy, and then just mindless hours of staring at the ceiling. This joke is great. What can make it better? And I'm just like, it's a good joke. It just is what it is. Here's what it is. I wouldn't get better. I would be the stale comic who'd just be like, all right, cool, you were funny once. But now they've seen that material and they've seen that bit. What's your next step of evolution?
Find a new venue.
I gotta move. I don't know who I am over there.
Brent's like, it took me 12 days to write that joke. I'm not changing it. No, but
40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah, but the reality of it is that most people that start comedy aren't good at any of those things. You know, it's just trial and error, failing over and over again and learning. I think that my mindset when I started comedy was pretty much anything that I apply myself to in life, I've been able to be successful at. Yeah. Whether it be hobbies or whether it be jobs, any job I've ever worked, as long as I apply myself and I try, I'll succeed. So I felt like going into comedy, that's all I needed because I didn't feel like I was ready for comedy. I didn't feel like I was funny enough for comedy. Yep. All I knew is that if I just go headfirst into it and I don't give up and trust myself, that I'll learn the ways of the wise, you know? Yep. And here we are 10 years later.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's why it's good to have mentors like Susan Jones and established comedians like that, because, I mean, not only that, you have to be open to their criticism, which isn't always fun, but it's necessary. Yeah.
And it's one thing if I roast you, but if an actual comedian roasts you, that's gotta be tough. That has gotta be tough.
Well, it is important to have mentors and people that care about you and want to help you, because she did save a couple years off of my experience for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all she was doing was passing down knowledge that had been passed down to her. That's been passed down from generation to generation. And if you listen to that advice, you can learn. But there are a lot of comics that when you try to help them, they don't want any of it. They don't want any of it. It's crazy.
They'd rather bang their head against the wall repeatedly, expecting a different result each time. I'm like, have fun with that, but the best way in life I've learned with most things is if there's someone who's been doing something longer than you and they try and help you, I need to shut up and I need to listen and be like, all right, what do you got for me? It's like, if you could shave off time, make me better, why wouldn't I listen? At that point, I'm just screwing myself for no reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's where the ego plays in, because like you really have to keep your ego in check to be able to do that.
And that's a great term, keep your ego in check, because in comedy, you kind of have to have a little bit of an ego.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is something that Susan mentioned to me. She goes, you can work on your whole life shedding yourself of your ego, but it never actually goes away in comedy, right? So you have to kind of walk into the building like you are the tits, and they are there to see you, and you are the person who's supposed to be the show, right? So your ego has to be kind of at that level, but not to the point where it's out of control, you know? So like you said, keep it in check, use it to your advantage when you need to get you up, to get you confident, and to make you feel good on stage, and then check it back into place when you're done. Because if you take that ego, if you have a good set and you walk around the house like you're the shit, you know what's gonna happen? Fucking, you're gonna trip and fall on your face every fucking time.
Every time.
So if you're an up-and-coming comedian, be sure to pay attention to the first 40 minutes of the show. You're gonna find a lot of gold here, a lot of good mentorship, and a lot of stuff that if you just apply to everything you're doing, you can be where these two gentlemen are, who have had 18 years experience combined in this industry, with very well-established comedians mentoring them who are absolutely huge names and just people you couldn't even fathom meeting, let alone having time to sit down with their lives and be like, all right, look, here's your set, here's what's good about it, here's what you need to work on a little bit, this part was just dog shit. But you need people like that who are just have a certain amount of success to their name where they can sit down here and be like, all right, cool, no matter what you say, I'm listening.
Yep. And you have to have an open mind, for sure. You have to have an open mind.
Oh, for sure.
And one of the things that we talked about, Brock, on our way back from Oregon the other couple weeks ago was a funny thing in my life that I realized recently was that I've been told by many other comics that I'm not funny, which is the most unoriginal thing that you can say to someone aspiring to be a comedian, is that they're not funny. But every single one of them that's told me I wasn't funny wasn't as funny as me. Right? So anytime I've met somebody that was more funny than me, they never told me I wasn't funny. They just said, hey, maybe work on this, maybe work on that.
Right.
You know, but comedians that tell you that you're not funny, chances are it's because they're not funny.
Yeah, exactly. And that's spot on. That was a very good point you brought up too. You had a lot of great nuggets of wisdom on the way back, which we'll touch on when we bring our other guest on, Drew. But
you have anything you want to get in before we get to that commercial break, Brock?
Just like you said, Brent, to any listener that is looking to do stand-up, just definitely keep in mind of everything that's been said these past 40 minutes, and you too can get paid $12 to perform in a dive bar.
And while we're talking about $12 for a little bit of love and attention, we're going to send you off to Dr. Love, who's going to give you a little bit of advice on your love life. Just remember, results may vary. Hitting that commercial break with Dr. Love.
Hey, what's up, Dr. Love? I got a quick question for you. I seem to be struggling with my dating life right now. I keep getting friend zoned, and it seems like no matter how hard I try, I just end up in the same place. Love to know what your advice is. Thanks.
Hey, Brock, it's me, Dr. Love, here to give you your key to get out of the friend zone. What you need to do to get out of the friend zone is super, super simple. You know, you're hanging out with this girl, right? She doesn't want to give it up. She's got tons of fine-ass friends, does she not? What you need to do, find out the girl you like's dream dates. And you're going to find this out for one simple reason. You're going to go talk to her friends. And you're going to go on all these dream dates with her friends. The uglier, the better. And you know why? You know why you do this? You do this for one reason. Make the girl who friendzoned you, regret not being with a player like you. This has been your key to success from Dr. Love. Be sure to check out Living with Humor on YouTube, where you can find me, Dr. Love, hanging out with my buddy, Uncle Tony, all the live long day. Holla, players.